COVID aside, there's also been an unusual rise in cases of something called RSV. Have you ever heard of RSV? It's a respiratory illness which usually impacts babies before the age of 2, and it can lead to more serious conditions like bronchiolitis, pneumonia and croup. There's not many things that are scarier, I would imagine, for a parent than seeing their young child experience difficulties in breathing. And the apparent rise in RSV has led to Public Health England encouraging parents to be aware of symptoms, especially in their very young children. I've been talking to Jess about this. She's lovely. Jess is a mom from Worcester, and she's experienced this respiratory syncytial virus firsthand with one of her children, Lily. Today, she's lending her voice to a new awareness campaign aimed at keeping other parents better informed. She joined me earlier on this morning alongside Professor Harry Schneer, Chair of Paediatric Infections and Diseases and Global Health at the University of Edinburgh. I started off by asking Jess to tell us her story.
So I have a little daughter called Lily who's 5 months old now, but unfortunately she had bronchiolitis caused by RSV when she was just 6 days old. It began with what we thought was a cold from my older daughter, Rosie, who passed it on to me when I was giving birth, and I passed it on to my newborn daughter. At first, we just thought she had a cold. She had like a runny nose, a cough, those sorts of things. But we began to be concerned when she was about 6 days old, as she had some breathing difficulties. She was breathing harder, faster than normal, and her breathing was a lot noisier. Even as a second-time mum, though, I was second-guessing myself, and I didn't know if it was normal. I thought, am I over-worried? Is this normal? So I actually ended up posting a video of her on a Facebook group, a mum's group, to see whether other people agreed with me. They did, and I ended up taking to A&E because of that, thankfully. When I got to A&E, they checked her over, and because she's had drops in her feeds, and she also had some pauses in her breathing as well, which was really worrying. Yeah. So they actually admitted her to the children's ward. It was there that she was closely monitored. They kept an eye on her oxygen levels and checked for pauses in her breathing as well. And they also did some swabs. And the swab actually came back, and they told me in the hospital that she had RSV, and that had caused bronchiolitis. So that was the cause of her breathing issues. It was such a scary time, and kind of every parent's worst nightmare to see their child ill, firstly, but secondly, just with the breathing, which is something so vital at that age.
Yes.
So it's a really scary time.
And did you know anything about RSV before this?
It was something that I'd kind of heard of, but I didn't know much about. I'd heard of bronchiolitis more, but RSV I didn't really know much about, so it was quite a surprise, really. So I think it's really important as part of this campaign that Sanofi is doing together against RSV, that they're raising awareness for RSV and the things to look out for.
And how is your daughter now, Jess?
Well, it took her a long time to actually recover, to be honest. She was in hospital over 2 days, and then we had to pop back later in the week as well because her breathing still wasn't right. And then the congestion, all the other things, and the nighttime symptoms, they kind of persisted for over a month. So it was a really tough time, especially when I was recovering from the birth and she's so little and vulnerable. So it was a tough time.
Let's bring in Professor Harry Schneer now. Professor Schneer, good morning.
Good morning, Malcolm.
Is Jess's story one you've heard over and over again? Is this a usual thing?
Obviously, what Jess had to go through was very traumatic, and although this virus commonly affects all children by the age of 2, Jess's daughter got it when she was just 6 days old. That is generally a more unusual age for a child to get RSV. Usually you would see RSV, you do see RSV in that sort of age group, like 6 days old or in the first 28 days of life, but it's very uncommon. You see that more in the first, after the first month of life. So in the first 3 months or so, you would see a lot of RSV happening if it's in the RSV season. But what obviously has happened in Jess's case was that because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the measures, including social distancing, masking, hand washing, all these non-pharmaceutical intervention measures, saw the RSV disappear. So after March 2020, we didn't see RSV for a long time, and we saw RSV only come back in circulation in the UK last summer. So obviously Jess didn't have any antibodies of herself to pass on to the baby, and therefore the baby was more vulnerable, and that's what you see. So suddenly there's an infection that it gets introduced into the home, and the mum gets infected, and the mum passes the infection on to the baby, and the baby's got no antibodies, no protection against RSV. And in that particular age group, I think it is really worrying. So I think the good thing is that Jess was able to identify that this was severe, was able to recognize signs like there were pauses in breathing, for example, what Jess was saying. That is a clear red flag where you would want to go to the hospital and get admitted. So I think this is a very common virus, particularly in the first couple of years of life, so they are vulnerable.
So it's vital that parents know about this, and they know what to look out for, and they know what to do about it going forward, yes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for any child, any infant, it is really important to see if the child is having a very fast breathing, or the child is having a very shallow breathing, or if the child is having pauses in breathing, if the child is turning blue, for example, if the child is not feeding well. I think feeding is one thing most parents can identify very quickly. The others are sort of slightly more difficult unless you've been observing and you've had a child before, that this is what the normal respiration looks like. You may not be able to pick up, but all these things are going to be signs that the child really needs to get to the hospital.
Well, Jess, you mentioned how scary this was for a newborn baby. I think you've done a great job this morning in making others aware of it, and I'm just pleased that everything is, well, now on the right path for you and your family. Is that right to say?
Yes, definitely. Thank you for that, Malcolm. Yes, it was a really scary time, and I just think it's good to raise awareness for things like this, so other parents know what to look out for, so we can prevent things like this from happening as much as you can, really.
It's great work from Jess, that is. She's in Worcester, and it's great to know that Lily has recovered and they're all back to normal. That was Jess then, with Professor Harry Snare also joining in the conversation, Chair of Paediatric Infectious Diseases at the University of Edinburgh. Both of them trying to just raise a little bit of awareness of this RSV, what it is, how to spot it, and what can be done about it.